Okay, so we're starting recording. All right, so back to the registration roster. The class start and end dates. I'm going to list 1 to 23 through 3/15, and these are random dates. So say we have Jane Doe enter the class, and she enters on the first day of class, the second. And class is being conducted on main campus. And this is going to be, that term falls in the spring 2023. So Jane Doe's colleague ID number or advances number, we listed that. So Jane would enter the class. She's entered on the first day of instruction. So Jane would sign her signature here. And any other class participants, any students that enter would also follow her lead. And they would list their ID and their signature as well. The instructor would sign and the date that I submitted it. And intake signature is something that we had a process at Wake. The intake signature was like the next chain of command. You can certainly remove this feature if you do not utilize that, or you can even make it an editable version. So the total number of students that we have listed are 2 for this particular roster for this day. And we only had 2 students show up for this particular example on that first day of class. Next day of class, if there are more students that are attending the class for the first time, then we would, of course, add them to a new roster, making sure that we change the date to reflect the new date and the new student names, and the students would sign. So do we have any questions? Oh, yep, Claudia, I see your hand.
Hey, Carla, thank you
Hi.
for this.
You're welcome.
So I have a question. So at the point the students are signing the roster, we are assuming that no students have been registered to that class just yet. So in this case, Jane and Jose, they were new that day in class, and at some point they will be registered in class, or they were already registered in the actual roster.
So because the class began on January 2nd, it was the very first day of class. So we know that the students have never attended that specific contract or section number at all. That was their very first day of attending the class. So that would be the only time they would have to complete the registration roster, was their very first day that they enter the class for that section.
So before they entered that class, they went to, they were to the intake process, and they did their NRS registration paperwork, but they were never added to BSP 2000. I guess the protocol was students show up in the classroom. That is when, green light the process to actually register them in the class. Is that right?
Yes. Now, Claudia, do you conduct your orientation and your testing session all in one section?
Most of the time, yeah, but there are some instances that is impossible, especially with CBOs and that type of thing.
Yes. So as they enter your orientation session, that if that's considered a section by itself and you're calculating hours on it, then you could also use the registration roster here and sign them in for that particular section that time. That particular class, but you would need a registration roster for each date and each separate contract that the student attended.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's a registration per section. So, let's say this is an open entry class. and that is open entry for, it's an 8-week, open entry for 5 weeks. So we'll have, several registration rosters.
Yes.
Because of the nature of the open entry.
Yes, you will. For every day that you hold class, that you have open enrollment, you would need a registration roster there available in the event that a new student were to enter the class.
Gotcha.
If you do not have any new students that enter that day, which happens, then it's fine to, you wouldn't turn in anything because you wouldn't have anything to submit. But if you have new students for that day, then yes, by all means, you would need to complete the registration roster.
Okay. How did you deal with the whole colleague ID? Or their ID number? Would you, the students don't typically know that information. Was that added after the fact, or?
Many of our students, when I was at a community college, many of our students did not know their ID. We tried our very best to make sure that they did gain that information, and they felt more like a college student when they had access to their identification number. In the event that they were like, I just don't know, I'm not sure, or they transpose the numbers, sometimes that happens, then yes, by all means, it's okay for the instructor to write their ID number. The ID number, the purpose of having that there is those who have multiple last names or those who have enrolled under one name and never updated their record but signs it. So say Jane Doe got married and she's now Jane Jones, but she's signing everything Jane Jones, but we have her listed in the system as Jane Doe. It's just a secondary measure to make sure that we are in fact reporting on Jane Doe Jones.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, is there anything that goes into the student file indicating what classes they have taken? No, the purpose of the registration roster isn't to serve as like a transcript. It's more as a, let's see, we use the LEIS forms as registration sheets. So Jessica discouraged that. Her guidance was to use the registration roster. And many providers have been following that format, but she suggests that you use the registration roster. Yes, this meets compliance, and I'm glad you asked that, Melinda, because I also have written guidance from Jessica. Let me pull it up, and she has cited the memo. Let's see. She cited the memo that that mentions that the compliance officers are aware of this and that they have given their stamp of approval. I can give you the actual memo in just a second. Yes, you will use a registration roster for each class. I'll have to find the information from Jessica, and I'll include it in this chat so that everyone will have the code and the memo.
And Carla,
yes,
just because some colleges do it the way that Carla just described, the two colleges I was previously at use the registration roster. The LEIS form was not used for registering for classes, and it wasn't a compliance issue, especially for Title II. And the LEIS form is designed for Title II data collection, even though some colleges had been using it for registering students. Its design is for collecting data for Title II. And so the registration roster is something that it meets compliance. And there are several colleges that were already doing that anyway, if you were concerned. But Carla, as she said, she will give you the citation. So you will have that for your records.
Thank you, Delonda. I just posted it in the chat. So in case you would like to read the memo or even go back and dig into this process a little deeper. Let me make sure I've gotten all the comments. We have a registration form and a registration roster for each class. Okay. You are welcome to use your own registration roster. This was just a suggested template that we are offering for you. You can customize this. Again, as Delonda said, this is the approved one. We know this one is the tried and true. So you want to make sure that if you have a customized registration roster, that it closely parallels with this. Okay. We use the registration for brand new students entering the program. So Jennifer, are you asking or are you telling me that all students registering in the class new and returning sign the registration roster?
I was just replying to Melinda, telling her that we use a registration form that asks for basic information, and we also have a registration roster that all students sign.
Okay, all right. Thank you for sharing.
I can share the template that we use for our registration roster I don't know if that would help anybody. I know a lot of people use the LEIS as the registration form, but I don't know if that would help.
Okay.
I just want to confirm if that's
Mhm.
okay. All right, so we currently use the LEIS form when they come at an intake, and we actually use that to register them in orientation. We have a separate session. And then when they go to class and they go for the very first day, they complete another LEIS. I was already asking, can we change that and deviate, because that is a duplicate and very kind of too much, you know. So would it be appropriate to do the LEIS at the orientation session? And if they're out over 90 days, they still have to go back through that intake process. So we would hit them then, right? And
Yes.
then I do like having some form of a registration sheet when they're going to the class, because we do like to put that in our class folder, just so all instructors can go to the hard copy folder and say, oh, they're currently registered. And then we have a process now where when they are graduate or graded out, that's attached to that. We have a checkoff sheet, so everybody all shifts can see and know where we're at. So would that be appropriate, again, to come up with a registration sheet that is an abbreviated type thing to go in the file, but then also have this class roster to put in the section folder? Would that be okay?
Yes, that's just fine. That is totally fine.
And I'm cohort 3, so I don't even really know what my new folder process and procedure, what's that gonna look like,
Right.
But I'm scared to change too much from where I'm currently at. Too many changes at one time could be scary for my people, so.
I completely understand. Yes, this is the registration roster the template is meant to hopefully prevent you from having additional work. And you're welcome to use my template, make it your own, add whatever you need to do as far as like logo or take away the intake field if that's not something that's applicable with your program.
And making sure I'm correct. So for each section, we need to have a CCR, student registration roster, available daily. And if we have new students sign it, then that would be turned into my LEIS specialist, and she would register those new students.
Yes.
And then with these rosters all go into the section folder.
You go in your compliance folder.
Compliance folder. Okay. I just want to make sure. And if there are days that we don't have any, we don't have to put one in there.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's see, make sure I've gotten everybody. Belinda, for the online learners, you would type or print the student's name on the registration roster. And the first day that you have a Zoom report or whatever online format you're using, the software, then the first day that you actually have attendance on that student is the date that you would list on the registration roster for them to be registered to that section. Let's see. New student registration forms with pertinent information plus registration forms for each class they enter. Returning students who are already in the system fill out registration rosters only for each class attending. So new students will complete the LEIS form at some point in their, we're going to call it their orientation phase. Then as all students enter class for the first time, they will complete the registration roster. And I included the little note with student sign in and sign out sheets because I didn't want you to think that the registration roster takes the place of the sign in or sign out sheet. Yes, yes. LEIS plus the roster. Yes. All right. So if anyone would like me to share the registration roster workflow to give you more of a visual workflow, I'm happy to do so. I attached to this meeting invitation the registration roster template, so hopefully each of you have that. Melinda said so. Online students do not sign the actual roster sheet. Correct. You use their Teams or their Zoom log as their signature component. So do I have any additional questions? Or Delonda, and Lashima, if you have anything that you would like to add or anything that you can think of that I may have overlooked.
I don't. Thanks, Carla.
Okay.
I do not. Thank you, Carla. You've done a great job.
Oh, well, thank you.
I have a question real quick.
Yes, yes.
So our online is done through Edmentum courseware.
Mhm.
So would they still need to just that when by her printing the time sheets, would that be sufficient? How do we?
So with Edmentum, you use the time on task as your calculator for the time entries of instructional is dated. The first
Yes.
date that the student enters the class,
Yes.
you would write their name on the registration roster, and then you would date it the first day they enter class for that term and that particular session. If they are taking multiple classes, you would need a registration roster for every class that they attended because the dates may vary. They may start science on Monday and math on Tuesday. Yolanda, online does not sign the roster out. No, you use their Zoom or their Teams or whatever Edmentum, whatever software you utilize for online instruction. That would be your student signature because it's a unique credential that they're signing in. So that would serve as their signature. But you would still print those out, and that's part of compliance anyway. Sherry, do you have any additional questions? I see your hand. I just want to make sure I got you.
I can speak faster. No, I need to learn how to unraise my hand.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. I just wanted to make sure I had answered all questions. I mean, it's a really, really simple form. I just wanted to make sure I had the workflow in place for everyone to make sure that they were able to take the workflow that I'm thinking of and had a visual to be able to apply it to the internal functions of within your program, because it does vary.
Just to make sure I'm clear. Edmonton, when
Uh-huh.
they are their first under time on task, when they become active, they're
Yes.
going to submit a registration roster. The instructor will put their name on that registration roster, and she will submit that to the LEIS, and that's where she will register the student for that.
Yes. Yes.
And then her time sheets and so forth will always be printed and put in the file, and that will go down as her electronic signature.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, then I'm going to give you 30 minutes of your day back. If you come up with a thought or an idea or a question that is burning in your soul and you need to have a response, please feel free to reach out to me. I will put my email address in the chat here for you so you can reach out to me, and I will answer you as quickly as possible. All right. Thank you so much for your time. All right. Thank you so much.